Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Banfield. This is Primetime Justice. One of the most popular shows out right now is on Netflix, 13 Reasons Why, and it touches on a subject that's extremely tough to talk about, teen suicide.
Settle in, because I'm about to tell you the story of my life. More specifically, why my life ended. And if you're listening to this tape, you're one of the reasons why.
Though widely popular and a hit with TV critics, some parents and mental health experts are worried that the show is making suicide, teen suicide, all the rage. Across the country, school districts are warning parents that students might now see suicide as the very answer they're searching for, a way to get heard or a great way to blame somebody else for their problems. Kids aren't always seeing the show's positive messages woven throughout some very mature themes. And to say there's a growing fascination among teens with this show is an understatement. But is there a growing fascination among teens with suicide and death? That is where we want to begin tonight, because a story came across our radar that has us thinking. In Utah, hunters made a gruesome discovery early Saturday morning near a campground and called 911.
It was about 7:15 or so Saturday morning when our deputies were dispatched to a report of a girl's body hanging from a tree.
It was a 16-year-old girl hanging from that tree, and the sheriff's deputies say next to her body was her cell phone and a note urging whoever found the body to watch the video on the phone. And here is how the investigators described it.
But there was discussion about her killing herself. She passed out at some point during their conversation as he was recording, and as she passed out, her weight went down and she hung from the rope and died.
They didn't have to look very far for the person who actually shot the video. The deputies say while they were actually on the scene, an 18-year-old named Terrell Probation approached them and told them he not only knew the girl, but that he watched her die. The investigators claim that Probation admitted picking the girl up the night before. He also admitted he was with her when she purchased the rope and the can of compressed air that she used to pass out to make that hanging easier. In a rare move, authorities in Utah have decided to charge him, not with accessory, but with actual murder. They say he didn't stop that 16-year-old girl from taking her own life. Aaron Rosen is the news director for KKAT-AM 860. He joins me from Salt Lake City. Aaron, it is a very unusual charge, murder. Why do they think that he's responsible for her murder?
Well, Ashley, as you know, in the legal realms in Utah, we have a statute that covers being not just, as you stated, a possible accessory, but that when you're there and you notice a crime occurring and you fail to report that crime, you can be charged as that crime is actually stated in the statute, and that would be negligent homicide or homicide.
So it appears that he was along for the ride while she not only purchased the rope, but bought that air duster, compressed air that made her pass out when she huffed it, that he took her to that very spot, and that he actually helped to tie the noose. Is this all accurate?
Well, according to the probable cause statement, which our newsroom has received, he stated that these were items of concern that he actually brought up himself voluntarily, and of course through the thorough investigation through the Utah County Sheriff's Office. So if those are his statements, those are very serious charges he's looking at himself.
And there were a couple of other things that he volunteered, as you know, Aaron, it's surprising, but Sergeant Spencer Cannon actually offered this up to the press regarding what that young man told them when they questioned him. Have a listen.
He disclosed to the investigators that he kind of had a fascination with death, had an interest in watching someone die.
Aaron, did he also talk about a possible suicide pact between the victim and himself?
Well, initial investigators on scene stated that he had mentioned that that may be a consideration or may have been a consideration with this young lady who went missing after work the night before. But of course he was there and he failed to report it, he failed to get help or contact authorities. And so ultimately, in the state of Utah, the statute's pretty clear about assisting in criminal activity. And the fact is also, Ashley, that she was a minor. As a juvenile in the state of Utah, and he being an adult can contribute to the delinquency of her being a minor as well, and that's also an issue.
And what about the fact, Aaron, that he suggested to these interrogators that he himself was suicidal? Does that play into this at all?
Well, of course. I mean, people who are struggling, as she has been reported to have struggled with mental illness and suicidal ideation, of course, as teens are really having a difficult time these days. That can come up into play, of course, when it comes to negligent homicide or homicidal cases. That's not typically a defense, though, in this case.
All right. Hold that thought for a second, Aaron. I want to bring in Darby Fox. She's a child and adolescent family therapist, good friend of mine as well. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I didn't think I was ever going to be talking to you about this, although you and I have had conversations before about 13 Reasons Why. I'm going to get to that in a moment. First, to this case in particular. Is there anything that stands out about this series of events, the sequence, and then the charging of this other teenager to you?
Well, the charging does seem extreme if you think about a suicide, but he is an 18-year-old. She was 16. He helped her purchase everything. He set it up, and he filmed. And he filmed for an extraordinary long time, 10 minutes. He watched her fall off. She was clearly dead, and he kept questioning. In fact, they say they see him in the tape, so he went to check. That's pretty disturbing. It does make us question his well-being mentally. Where is he? But that's a very disturbing, long amount of time for him to participate.
And this whole notion, Darby, that this was videotaped, that there was this message, look at the video if you find me dead. It really sort of harkens to this television show. It was never mentioned in this particular case, but it harkens to this television show, 13 Reasons Why, that is just all the rage with kids these days. And I know that it's giving people like you in your profession heart palpitations.
It is, because what we're seeing is we aren't seeing it was intended possibly for older, 19 through 24, for a different audience. But with the way we can access social media and Netflix these days, I just spoke with an 11-year-old today, a client of mine, who said she didn't find it disturbing. The suicide was not disturbing. The rape was not disturbing. She just didn't know what the big deal was. So it is troubling, and they make suicide seem like a heroic response or action, and they're blaming other people, which in this Utah case is similar to what she did.
And you don't have to go too far in your own work to have had an incident almost identical to this. Notwithstanding the 11-year-old girl who said this isn't weird, suicide and rape, big deal. Another client was something frighteningly close.
2 weeks ago at a very serious, in fact, it's what brought 13 Reasons Why to my attention, a very serious incident of a 15-year-old girl that was writing letters instead of sending tapes, as we saw in 13 Reasons Why. She was doing letters to blame people and speak about her anger, but she was getting ready to kill herself. And we can never underscore the seriousness of that.
Listen, it's hitting home for you. It's hitting home for me. I got this from my child's school. I'm going to read part of a statement that went out to all the parents, and it said regarding this program, the concern is that rather than presenting a nuanced exploration of the complex reasons people kill themselves, experts say 13 Reasons Why presents a rather simplistic blame game, dangerously reinforcing the incorrect idea that suicide is the only way you can truly be heard, or that it can be used as a tool to make those who have hurt you suffer. Does that pretty much hit the nail on the head for what you're seeing in practice?
That's very well written, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, suicide is always tragic. It is never an answer for, it's not heroic, it's not anything that we should make light of in that way. It's not a solution to any challenge or adversity ever.
And to be super clear here, I have not seen the program yet. I fully intend to watch it. But I am told by those who've seen it that it does explore the detritus that is left behind, the insufferable nature of what this does to the families. It's not as though those themes aren't also right there alongside what kids might misinterpret as, their only answer.
It does explore that, but there are a lot of other things going on at the same time. And so you have to understand that if we're watching it and we are in the 11 to possibly 18-year-old range, we're picking up on the most sensationalized piece of it. We aren't looking at how did that affect my mom, or is that going to last for my dad. That's just not logical. What any young adolescent is going to pick up on is what's the most sensational piece, and that's where it's dangerous.
We all know kids are selfish by nature.
Right.
They haven't really branched out into the empathy for others. I want to bring in Danny Savelis and Eric Guster into the conversation as well, because clearly, guys, this is a conversation where he's going to need to defend himself. And I think, given the rarity of this, given the nature of what these charges are, it might not be that hard to defend himself. Am I wrong?
You're onto something. I mean, thinking like a defense attorney, this case, you always make the argument that suicide is an intervening act, something that's done totally independently. But we have seen cases where the defendant's involvement was so dramatic that it could be said that he was assisting the suicide. And it can be factors like buying a noose, driving them to the location, but merely filming a suicide without more would not be enough for criminal liability. Instead, you look at the other things the defendant may or may not have done to assist, encourage, facilitate, or otherwise help.
What do you see in this, Eric? I mean, there could be so many things that play into this. This young man himself offered up to the police that he himself was suicidal. Does that help in terms of his defense? Does he go insanity route? I mean, at this point, does it factor in for him?
The defense has to use an insanity defense. You have someone who claimed to be suicidal, told the police that he participated in this, filmed a suicide, which is not normal to most of us. If you were going to sit there and watch someone die, that's not something that you would expect that we want to do. But just like Danny said, he helped facilitate it. He drove her to the place to buy a rope. He actually tied the noose according to his statement, which is aiding and abetting someone in the harm of themselves.
Aiding and abetting is different than murder.
But that can be murder. That can be murder. If I give you the gun and you go and pull the trigger, I am committing murder by my participation in it.
Let me ask you, Darby. A producer brought up a really good point. When we were kids, we read Romeo and Juliet. And that is a double suicide among teens in love. And who among us wasn't a teen in love? How is this different? How is this show any different than Romeo and Juliet?
It is different in that the novels, you read through them, and usually you read Romeo and Juliet in an English class or literature, and someone was kind of going through it with you and you were analyzing the different pieces of the character. What is dangerous about this is it is going to an audience, anybody who can turn on Netflix. And so they're taking in this information and they're not processing it. And many of the people are way too young to have the experience to neurologically process. There's rape, there's drugs, there's underage drinking, there's voyeurism. All kinds of things are in this, which you might go through in English class, which is very different than visually seeing it and having a live experience.
And I want to be really clear. Like, we reached out to Netflix to get their response to this, because it isn't like they haven't heard this debate. They didn't respond to us. They didn't respond to CNN in its effort to reach out for comment about this as well. But clearly, I think that this is on the radar. They just in the last couple of days have been renewed for another season. So this is an opportunity for parents to talk to your kids. I mean, now we are seeing the most dire of consequences actually playing out. It's a teaching moment, I think we can all say. Darby, thank you. Great to have your expertise. Danny and Eric, I'm going to ask you to stick around if you can, please.